Hello, good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad you joined me today. We are going to do a little bit of a New Year's show, and that's why I'm dressed ready for the new year. So I know that's not something that everybody honors or recognizes, and I'm not going to get into any of that, but I just thought it would be a great marker. So before we start, if you're new to the program, I am an attachment specialist, a marriage and family therapist, and so you're going to hear stuff from that lens and perspective. So hopefully you'll like it, enjoy it, and get something out of it. And whatever you have been up to today, whatever your week's been like, whatever you've been doing, not doing, wishing you had done, wishing you had not done, the future begins now. So let's just start and get into the big hour here, because it always feels like that hour just goes by so quickly. So anyway, yes, so nice to see you. So here we are in a metric of the year, measuring by a mainstream New Year's metric. Now, the Bible has 3 different ways where it measures the year. The civil, there's the agricultural, there's the different ways. Wish you had actually my friend Kisha Gallagher, if you go to her website, which I'm going to link down so you can just click right into it, Grace and Torah, she has a lot of great teachings on that and points you also in directions of people that are really great about that, and teaches in depth. But I just want to talk about this as the new year, not like it's my big new year, but it is a marker so many people are using to stop one year and start another one, at least in more of a secular sense. So just because it's a time to do that, and it does come sort of naturally, because things come naturally to you that you've done since you were a child. And a lot of us have done New Year's Eve since we were children. And maybe this is just a way to look at a couple of things. So I thought I would show you, and a lot of people will say things like, I cannot wait to get 2020 out. It's been such a crazy, difficult, contentious, stressful year. And I'm going to echo that. And that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the moment. And we'll talk about that. But yeah, I'm one of those people that thinking, it'll be at least something different. I write on a check the year, right, from the year before. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking as we talk about this. So let's just talk about it. So yeah, so I'm kind of in sequins and my little tuxedo here. So I thought this could be just a little bit of a festive way to look at. And it's funny, I have a little glitter on my clothes. And if you were watching, for people that were watching like last week's show, it was so funny. If you watch it, like about, I don't know if it's just a few minutes into it, but I have these nails I use. My friend Alyssa Vaden, she sells them. It's called Color Street, and it's nails. People are always asking me about my nails. I don't know why. People just like this stuff, I guess, because it's so nice and shiny. And what it is, it's these little nail things that come, if I can show you one here, it comes like 98% dry. And then you just it's like wet nail polish, just press it on, and it dries by itself like a regular nail would. It's just really like paper, super translucent, paper thin. Anyway, someone had gifted me another type of nail, and I tried it. Well, it did not work as well. And as I was talking, it caught on my sweater or something, and it peeled off. They're not fake nails. It's just nail polish. But anyway, so in the middle of it, I'm looking around for my nail. I didn't even announce what I was doing, but it's so funny because people were asking me, what were you looking for? That was the nail. So anyway, back to Color Street with the way I do my nails. I'm very bad at doing that. And since COVID, I have not been keeping up with nails. And if it wasn't for Alyssa, I wouldn't even have anything on my nails. So anyway, the future begins now, even for my nails. So anyway, that just seems to be this topic that I hear. It's funny, the things that people are excited about hearing and talking about. It's like sometimes something as small as nails, people really like that. But okay, so let's look in. I want to do a couple things here today. If I can get my mouse to work. Okay, because I have some notes. So I want to look back at this year. This has not been an easy year for me particularly, and the world in general, and pretty much people have struggled. And this past year, my father-in-law passed away, and my husband was really sick and continues to work through things with his health. And we moved, and there's been some things that have happened that have, can push people. And ooh, yes, I mean it's been rough. And then of course a global pandemic and a political upheaval that has been really challenging, really difficult. I'm fortunate that I have good, loving friends I trust and respect, and just have so much support. Not that I've reached out for that as much as I should have, which is another thing we'll talk about. But I want to look back at this year and and a few of the things that I've learned, that I have learned. Okay, so I want to maybe see. I'm a firm believer that the Ruach is working in this earth, and can be very similar to your experience. Can be similar to my experience, and I've noticed like a lot of people are having similar experiences to me, and they're in the same place, addressing different angles in this kaleidoscope of view we have of this existence from a spiritual lens. And I think it's interesting. And I think I see things happening, and I think things are kind of consistently happening. So I thought maybe we would talk about some of these things. So first of all, I want to ask you this question, and it's something that sometimes I don't think we question things enough. I think we just have this conscience that's seared with a hot iron, where we don't even think I need to critically look at this word, and maybe it isn't the word I've always thought it meant, or whatever. But looking at things in a new, or I would say ancient way, kind of getting back to an ancient way and not laundering everything through our cultural lens now, I feel like really helps us understand the Bible, helps us understand God our Father, and helps us to understand how to live and how to approach things and how to think about things. And so one of the words that I think we have missed and misunderstood in a lot of ways is revival. And that word actually can evoke a lot of negative emotions in people that have been in religious systems where it's always this big push for this revival, or you've all failed and your life meant nothing. I mean, you really get religious systems that can go really far into that sort of thinking, right? That sort of thinking can be pretty pervasive, and I don't think it's easy for people to grow up that way. And I have adult sons, and I've tried not to not let them think they're going to have a future. But I know that's been a problem. Like, people have raised their kids that way, and they had the best of intentions. But this whole thing about revival, where it's like we've never, ever met the goal, ever. You never get there. And what does revival mean? It means to revive something, to wake something up, to bring something back into action. And so a lot of people think that means this charismatic movement of, I don't know, aggressive spirituality. I don't think that's what that means. And very specifically, maybe for a time there was this, but what is revival? Reviving what needs to be revived. In this case, in this phase, in this chapter, personally, I firmly believe that what revival is waking up some of our more basic things that have been dormant in the favor of, like, what I call bells and whistles, right? The theater of religion, rather than where you see me. I come from an attachment perspective. So everything that I read in the Bible, I'm going to read it through that lens. I don't have any other lens. I don't want any other lens either, because everything is about relationship. It's got to, like Yeshua is always teaching, it's got to have a point. And it doesn't mean that we always know the point, but we always know the one to whom we point, right? We're always pointing to God the Father and trusting his love in us. And if you are watching my program, pretty consistently, you get that message, right? I'm always sharing that this is our parent, this is our Father, and everything is about our relationship as his children. And everything in the Bible is to be taken through that perspective and not through a religious perspective. This is a relationship. It doesn't mean there's not ritual. It doesn't mean there's not sacred space. For sure, there's all kinds of weird things. But as we go through the Torah portions, and of course this week's, we are touching on how Jacob comes back and he's with Joseph, right? Yaakov and Joseph are together again. They're reunited and they're living in Egypt. And he lives there for like 17 years still during this famine where things are not okay back in the land. And does that sound familiar? I mean, the portions have been so spot on. Goodness, I'm telling you. But anyway, what could be being revived from a relationship perspective? Okay, so I'm going to give you what I think, what I've learned this year, what I've seen, and what my takeaway from this year is. But I've really noticed an enormous revival of attachment, where a lot of people learn about the Torah through different ways, different means. It might be a friend that said, I know you were taught that the Torah is really this sort of mean book of laws that eventually would be corrected. But that's not the case. And it's exciting to learn how it isn't, because what does it do? It proves again to us, to our hearts and to our confidence and our trust and our assurance of what a good Father we have. And that there was no plan B. And this is fine, right? This is wonderful. I think that's a big part of attachment, to be honest. And you might have learned that way, right? And then people change things they do. They stop doing certain celebrations. They add on other celebrations, or some people don't stop celebrating things. They just add things that they're celebrating, and then they delete things as they go, or they double up or whatever. But different people have a different way that they're managing all of these things. But some people, and a very vast majority of people, I would say in the Torah community, have not really known exactly how to do that. I would put myself in that category, and pretty much everybody I know, because nobody I know is claiming to have this whole thing figured out. But my group would tend to lean more rabbinical and more into the establishment of the thousands of years that the sages have taught us things, and there's wisdom there. And I really honor that. And that is amazing, because it's amazing how people love ritual in 100 million ways, except when it comes to the Torah. They think that's exempt of all ritual. But if you actually look at the temple, I mean, that is an example, example of ritual, right? And strange rituals, which aren't strange, but are to us, but are exciting. And the more you learn about the temple, the more you get accustomed to the idea that this is this otherworldly thing. This is this really big God who's got all of this vastness that we don't even understand. But that doesn't make him a mystery to us in a bad way. It reminds us that we're the little kids and he is the big dad who gets everything, who knows all the things we don't know. And so that level of trust is huge. It's an enormous thing. So when we're talking about attachment, we're talking about understanding how big our God is, not so we can decide how small we are for the sake of, oh, you're small, but to know your needs are met through your Father, that he is big, he is huge, he is enough, more than enough, he is everything. And you can trust him. And attachment is, when it comes right down to it, it's trust. Attachment is formed on the pillars of mutual satisfaction and delight in a relationship, mutual benefit, trust, consistency, and attachment that's meaningful. And so the relationship has to be meaningful to both parties. So if it's meaningful to him, that's exciting. And I feel like that piece is being revived. I think people are starting to wake up a bit to what is attachment? What does it feel like to be a child of God? Not just what do I do, which is a big part, but what does it feel like to be a child of God? So when you're a child of God, right? Or if you think about the Father uses from a spiritual perspective a lesson in the natural. He says, I'm your Father. And we know what it's like to be parents, a lot of us. It's not that hard to put two and two together and find similarities, and it helps you understand. He uses agriculture, plant a garden. You'll understand a lot of the principles of the Bible that he's telling you. Look at the weather. There's a lot of ways in the natural that we're taught these spiritual things. And so when we think about obedience to the commandments, this isn't to earn our salvation. And we say this all the time, but do we believe it? Because the way I see it is when it says, if you love me, obey my commandments. But if you look at that through a parental attachment lens, think about a parent saying this to their child, right? So the parent's smarter than the child. The parent knows more than the child. The parent made the child. The parent loves the child. And so the children, where it says it's better to obey than to sacrifice, it's right. It's like we would say to our kids, you don't need to go buy me a car, but don't go out and get addicted to drugs and get in trouble with the law and ruin your future. If you love me, do the things I've taught you to do to be the person I know you can be. And right, that's because it breaks your father's heart when you hurt yourself. And if he created the universe, and he did, and he put you in it to live, which he did, and he tells you this is how it works. If you love me, go with that, because you will break yourself. You will break. I don't want to watch you break. I want to watch you walk into your destiny. I want to see you, I'm paraphrasing, and I don't mean that to be irreverent, but I feel like the impression I get from the Father is, I want to watch you love these other people I made that I love, and watch these relationships form, just like we are with our children, or even people who don't have children that just have pets. And when I say just pets, I think pets can be just my pet is my favorite child on some level. But anyway, I digress here. But you even like to see your pets playing together. And how cute is it, right? When they have their little mannerisms, and love it when you get home or whatever. And so from an attachment perspective, if you love me, obey my commandments. It's like, if you love me, love this person that I made too, and love yourself. Take care of yourself. And here's how to take care of yourself. Here's what to eat. Here's what not to eat. Here's when to rest. And you should work hard. And you should, don't keep gross debris, matter, waste in your house. And take good care of an animal that's stumbling, and plant at this time, and prevent and Sabbath your land at this time. And like he tells you, I made everything. I'm in charge of everything, but you are going to make choices in your life, because I gave you a life to live it. So we can be together, but you're going to have your own choices, and your choices will dictate your destiny. Now, don't worry if you've made a lot of mistakes and if you feel like you missed your destiny. I don't even want you to ask yourself that question. That is a waste of time. Now, to the extent that we repent and restore from our end that relationship with that pure, beautiful desire of being close restoratively, your Father will never leave you nor forsake you. But when we leave and forsake him, sure, we repent. It's serious. And he takes it seriously because he loves us. And he knows we need that to be okay. We need repentance. And nothing I'm saying today is a rebuke to you. It is all to liberate you. I want you to really get that through your head here. We are being liberated. We're looking back over this year and seeing, and I'm telling you what my takeaway is. And maybe this will liberate you to be free to think this way too. Because choose joy. Choose joy to walk and follow, even though it's really, really hard. But from an attachment perspective, parenting, right? What's being revived? What does revival mean? I think right now, these truer, deeper parts of our relationship with the Father are starting to peek up through that soil. And wow, we've had some really hard times. I grew up in Vermont. And one thing that we always knew, and nobody had to teach me this, you just know that the rougher the year, the winter, the more beautiful your next fall would be. there's something about radical weather that did something for the foliage. And it was amazing, right? Or with your summer, whatever was radical, affected that, right? There's just something to be said about the way this universe works, this world works, agriculture, plants, people, music. It's all a message. It's all about your relationship with the Father. Now, none of this, as I'm talking about attachment and relationship, should challenge our desire to be obedient to our Father. And in fact, I'm saying the opposite. If you love me, obey my commandments, because I love you, he's saying, and I'm telling you how to walk into your destiny. So yes, you might have made mistakes. You might have done things wrong and missed opportunities, but I'm going to tell you something. All things work toward the good for those who believe and are called for his purpose. Now, that means you're going to have made mistakes and you're still going to walk into your destiny, because your destiny isn't really, I believe, this picture of success in a certain way. It's the journey, and it's this wider experience of falling in love with the Father over and over and honoring that he tells you to love yourself and to love your neighbor, and finding that over and over again in new ways and in old ways, and then redoing it again. And so from an attachment perspective, I think attachment from this more core place is being revived. And so people, while not abandoning obedience, are lightening up on a few of the other things that they thought were these big, huge deals. And we discovered it's really not that big of a deal. Or at least I do me, you do you, and we just kind of live and let live. I'm finding a lot more of that. It's much more pleasant. That's one thing I found, the revival of attachment. And so I also found to kind of piggyback on that and segues nicely into this point here is the revival of moderation, which is very radical for Torah people in many, many ways. Coming back to moderation. Okay, what is moderation? I did a whole show on it once. A Musar, it's one of the Musar soul traits, and one of the traits that we study for moderation. That's really radical for a lot of people. And I've been talking about this a lot lately for the past month. Some people have to get the inertia to switch out of something into something else, like Torah study or whatever, which is, you know what they needed? Some radical thoughts, some radical energy, some inertia that was radical. And you know what? They don't probably need it as much. And that's sort of how life goes, right? It's just how life goes. You've got to give and get and understand the inertia of how that works. So with our children, we want them to take those first couple steps. We're real close, and we pull back more and more when we know that they can step further to get to us. Well, I feel like that's kind of what moderation is in essence, is learning to trust more and to take things a little bit more to the edge and risk a little more and not be as worried. I know that sounds scary. And I know this is my, like I was saying, these are some of those forbidden conversations, but remember when they were and this is in one of my books. I think this was in, let me see, Colossal Controversies, one of my Becky books. Might be in First Century Words. Anyway, in one of these, we talk about it, and I won't get into the scripture. I'm just going to mention the point because I want to honor the principle. Eat what's put before you. Okay. Now, some people, from an apologetic standpoint, that is not telling you, if somebody puts a big pork chop on your plate, just eat it to be polite. No. What they're talking about was this stuff that's sold in the market that they wouldn't be selling in this context a big pork chop. Maybe it was chicken, whatever, pheasant, or what they're eating, right? But maybe someone spoke to it and said it dedicated it to this little g god that doesn't really exist. Though, yes, little g gods exist because God refers to them. So, to whatever that means, we don't need to worry about it. But he says for conscience sake, Don't ask. Don't ask. Chicken's chicken, no matter what somebody says to it. If I say you can eat it, there's really nothing to say. Just eat it. But if you're at the table with a new believer, someone in that more zealous phase of like, I'm shifting from this to this, well, loyalty is part of attachment. The first thing you do is come into alignment with this person and get loyal and get okay with how to see this in a new way. Well, that would challenge a new believer that you were eating chicken that was dedicated to a little G God, and they're like, oh, we need to just ignore it. Right? Or then later they even talk about wine or whatever. New believers, people that are juicy little lambs that aren't experienced yet, they don't understand the relationship in this way, in the Torah way, as well yet. And it's like our relationship even with our earthly parents to some degree. You know how far to push your parents. Now, that might sound terrible, like irreverent, and I don't mean that. But what I mean is, this is a real relationship we have with the Father. And we are always working on our limits with him. And he tells us, right? And he tells me, you've pushed a little far there. And you sucked a couple people in with you. So let's back up and correct. And course correction is not a rebuke. It's a liberation from being wrong. That's excellent. Because the Father is never out to get you. He is always out to restore you and to restore the relationship he has with you and to be with you and to be close with you. And isn't that exciting? And isn't that what you want? Isn't that the way it should be? And is what we want the most important thing? Sometimes when it comes to attachment, if you don't want it, yes, it's the most important thing. Imagine if you had an arranged marriage and you were told you are going to marry this person, though they don't want to. What marriage is that to you? How would you experience that? How would you feel about yourself? How would you feel about the institution of that relationship, the foundation, the constitution of that relationship? Doesn't mean you don't fall in love later. And there's a million novels that love talking about that. But this is the part of attachment. So these less experienced Torah people are going to be much more scared of things, right? So like we just got through Christmas, right? So I don't celebrate Christmas, but I'm not afraid of Christmas music. I'm not afraid of if somebody says Merry Christmas to me, I'm going to be like, you too, or I hope you have a great holiday or whatever. I didn't used to be able to do that. But as I've grown and matured, and it's not a threat to my loyalty to the Father because we've worked this out, I can be more moderate. That doesn't mean I'm complacent. It doesn't mean I'm, letting go of important things. It means I'm just more mature in that area. And it's created more unity with family and friends and people. And I like that. And I think it's been very good for our relationship. So you see what I'm saying? Do you get me? For conscience sake, don't even ask. They're like, don't even talk about it. Moderation sometimes includes just not even talking about it. You don't always have to do this big, huge, serious conversation. Sometimes you're just having a relationship, and it's very radical to not, sort of have what I call like this Amway view of like, and this is not to put down any multi-level marketing. I know people who have businesses and do really well and love it and enjoy it and have these beautiful groups of people and they make money and they enjoy it. So I have a friend that does CBD and it's like amazing. And I have no problem with that. So I'm not using this as an example, a negative example, but it is if you apply it in the spiritual world, because people aren't in your downline as affiliates. Now that works for a business model for sure. You find willing people who want to invest, but this is a relationship. And so moderation is showing and understanding. It's showing up to the understanding that the Bible is real life. It's not just this separate book, even though the book itself makes you separate and holy, set apart for holy use, right? You understand? It's real life. It's getting up in the morning. It's making coffee. It's having coffee. It's what you saw and read on Twitter. It's all of these things, right? It's like all of life is worship. And once you can stop separating all these things and compartmentalizing everything so much, you start amalgamating everything together, you start finding purity is a complicated thing because there's all these people with all of these different angles in this kaleidoscope where they stand and where they are and where their development is. And they might be ahead of you or behind you, or who knows what that even looks like, or can we even tell? So I think so, right? So here we go. We start already with the allergies. Do you hear that lawnmower out there? It's so funny. I have the nicest guy that does our landscaping lawn, and he's like, oh my gosh, my nose is running. And I used to do the show at 6 p.m. I'm like, oh, could you not mow? He only mowed at 6. I'm like, can you change? And so now he said, oh yeah, I'll come earlier. And so now I do the show at 2 Eastern mowing to be nice. You see what I'm saying? And I have to like, hey, move back to 6, but isn't this how life is, right? That interaction is a part of life, and it's a part of my Torah walk. How do I handle that? What's the weightier matter? I don't even know if I want to approach it. You might just need to hear the lawnmower. I might need to try to concentrate, and I'm not a multitasker. But a renewal of moderation shows us that the Bible is life. It's living. It's a living book for living people. And there's stories about people who lived and live on in the stories. And anyway, so it leads you into like what's worldly, right? What does worldly mean? So if we're reviving moderation, we're really getting into understanding what is moderation, what is worldly. And worldly is a word. It's so funny. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were we were laughing because when I had grown up, the word worldly was such a positive word. It was like, oh, she was so worldly, meaning, well-traveled, had tried like beautiful foods and just had fashion and whatever. And of course, then you get into religious systems, and this means a person who's shallow and has their priorities wrong or whatever. But that's not the way I understood that word. But what is worldly when it comes in the spiritual world? Well, here is a slippery slope as well. Now, where we mentioned before, where we might actually, for the new believer, don't ask if the chicken's been spoken to in this way, because it will challenge what the other person think your loyalty is. The level of your loyalty will hurt them. And it'll be a little blip in the community, in the way they're trying to develop community with you and be part of the family. It's going to challenge them. They're not going to get it. So just the weightier matter is this person. So just forget eating that, eat the vegetables, and just help this person out. Don't judge that they're in that place. Like, that's a normal part of development. Let it go. So I really expanded on that by talking about it. Anyway, but what is worldly? Truly, right? So do we get to decide? I do not believe that we get to decide what's worldly for somebody else. And I don't even like the word worldly. It just sounds like a corny word. It's a doctrinal word, and I'm not that fond of it. But I remember years ago when I was first, I don't know if it was when I was first Torah, it was earlier days. And I remember having this conversation. There was this guy, and he, oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many people that had these really radical ideas. Like, it was a sin to wear high heels. I had this one person, and this was just bizarre. I was part of this study group online. And I remember this wasn't too early days, but this was when Prince William married Kate Middleton, and that royal wedding had come on. And I might have even talked about this before in this program. I don't know, but I watched that wedding. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning to watch the wedding, right? History in the making, very interesting. I thought it was exciting. I wanted to see, the chariot she'd ride, and I wanted to see her tiara. I wanted to see her gown. I couldn't wait. I wanted to hear the musical selections. I wanted to see everything. I'm kind of obsessed with the monarchy, even back from like 1207. I study and read a lot of Alison Weir books. I don't know, I just think it's interesting because I like to see power grabs and how that works. And I have a strategic mind. So I'm watching like how this worked and how that affected religion. And because the separatists came from that, I think it's kind of interesting behaviorally to find out how we have become the epistemology of who we are. And I really apologize about my allergies, but is it my fault? So I rescind my apology. But I guess I'm sorry I have to watch me like use a Kleenex. But anyway, so I watched it. And so this one guy was really upset with people who watched the royal wedding. That bothered him. Like he was at his house and all these other people were at their house. They watched the royal wedding and he got mad at them. He thought it was a waste of time. He said, if you watch the royal wedding, you're obviously not caring about the wedding supper of the Lamb. That's the only wedding we need to care about. Okay. Now, that doesn't warrant a rebuttal, but just for the sake of discussing what we're saying, obviously I was the rebuttal, right? Like, what are you talking about? Who are you to say what's a waste of time? And have you been to somebody else's wedding? Yeshua went to weddings. Like, have you had what? You're married. Did you have a wedding? Did people come? Well, why would you wake up at 4:30 in the morning? He says. Now that's none of his business, but of course I'm jumping in. Why would you wake up at 4:30 in the morning unless it's to pray for Israel? That's what he said. So that was his litmus test. If you're not praying for Israel, you're obviously worldly. Your priorities are wrong and you've got problems. So I was like, what do because of course all these new people are looking at this. And I'm thinking at that time, well, it's my job to help comfort them so they don't feel like God just hates everybody who watches a wedding, right? And anyway, so we got into this discussion and I was asking him questions. I was like, have you ever had pancakes for breakfast? And he's like, yeah, I have. And I'm like, well, you could have had an apple fully formed, ready to go. But you chose to invest time in cooking pancakes when you could have eaten an apple. And you could have spent that time praying for Israel. To make my point. Well, I'm not even going to tell you. It's the weirdest thing. I got like 70 emails from this person with pages and pages of ranting on how I shouldn't have encouraged young believers to watch the royal wedding. I think he could have spent that time praying for Israel. But anyway, I was just like, it's a slippery slope when we decide what's a waste of time for other people. Now, for me, I got up at 4:30. It was about a 3-hour thing because you watch all the people showing up, you watch the whole service, and then you listen to all the commentators talk about the dress after. I like that, right? I'm a girl. So I spent about 3 hours doing that. And then after that was done, about 7:30 in the morning, I went on with my life. And I had memories of watching that history happen and of that wedding. And then I moved on and lived. But this person perseverated for months and it just became so weird. And I remember it was a very good lesson for me to hear this real legalistic judgment on something which I felt like was so innocent, but he felt like was, the nefarious actions of a shallow woman. Okay. So it was a good lesson really early on. Now, do we need to get into arguments with people like that? No, but I was younger in my faith, and I really felt like I wanted to make a point. And I don't know, I think it did help people. I actually got a lot of other emails from people saying, thank you. That was scary because I'm new and I didn't know, like, is that how I have to be now? Do I have to, I'm like, no, you don't have to be that way. But anyway, this whole idea of what is worldly, I would wish you could take that off the table for other people. Now, there will be a very important concept. My mentor, Dr. Halissa Elwine, she says, like mind and like kind. And you're going to have your inner circle and your trusted others. And she has taught me, I really feel like she's really been good at helping me understand that. Because I have more of an extreme personality And that's the way I am. I don't have balance. I'm extreme. And so I have to learn how to handle that. I don't even know if it's in me to be balanced, but I can learn how to live in extremes and rein it in and park it and do what I have to do. And she's been very helpful to me to manage that. Not saying I manage it all that well, even though she's done a great job helping me, but understanding how to walk through this life and live and let live, whilst there are those times where you might want to mention somebody, I don't think this is the best thing that you're doing because this might hurt you, or you're posting a lot of very provocative, stressful things on Facebook, and it might just be time to give that a rest. That's not bad advice. There's not this blanket statement where we paint everything with one brush, right? So not everything I say, as my old friend, may he rest in peace, David Negley used to say, every example doesn't have to walk on all fours, right? So, and it's true, right? We don't need to take everything to extremes all the time. But the idea of just, living in just the biggest part of that when it comes from an attachment lens is to remember you are not the Ruach, and to trust that God is in control. And it's not your job to fix everybody, correct everybody, pray everybody into where they need to be, right? That's a false set of, it's all on me. And it really, I think, reveals an attachment wound where it's like, I'm the responsible party. When really your powerful father, you're the weaker party. He's the stronger party. He takes care of you. He meets your needs. This is on him, not on you. They are his responsibility. Even you are his responsibility. He is the responsible party. You can depend on that. Now, within that, don't break your father's heart. Don't go against things he's told you not to do. I will promise you, he never told me not to watch the royal wedding. I would have heard that loud and clear, because it would have been very, like, what a bummer. If he had told me not to watch it, I wouldn't have. And there are things that people do that I don't do, that he has told me not to do. And it's, nothing I want to put on anybody else and tell them that they're wrong. But I don't do certain things, and I don't judge other people for doing them, even though I really firmly just wouldn't do it. So live and let live is part of moderation, is understanding that you don't know what's worldly for somebody else. So you might think TV is the worst thing in the world, and another person might watch TV to relax, and it's fine. There's content on TV that you might feel like is racy, when there's content in the Bible that's racy, right? Storytelling. So I don't know. In the Bible, of course, these are real stories of our family and things that have happened. But are we to judge another person in that way? No. We are not the judges of good and evil, and that will kill us if we think we can know it. So as far as what's worldly, I've learned that there's been a revival of moderation, which has brought in, we're going to segue into this next point, the revival of compassion. And so, wow, what a year, right? We have been dealing with governments, dealing with mandates, masks, illness, a whole complete set of new rules by which to live, and ways to respect other people's needs and fears and comforts, and how they need to feel. At the same time, we're sacrificing very important things to us. And there's really, we don't really know all the answers or what to do. So compassion's like this new thing. And now there's nothing new under the sun. Compassion's always been so important. But my takeaway this year is I have definitely found more compassion. I really feel like a lot of people that I used to think, oh, I can't believe the way they think. And I still have that going on. I'm not saying that I have mastered that by any means. But from some degree as well, I also say, but I could see how they could believe that. Doesn't mean I agree or I'll do it or whatever. But I can see they have a point. I just don't agree with it. And that's been really liberating. Like I said, I'm not rebuking you. I'm trying to help liberate you from some of my takeaways this year, is that it's like that revival of compassion. And so we're getting out of time here, so I got to keep going. When you are focused on compassion, you're, by saying for the week's going to be, you're a spouse, not a spy. You're not always on the lookout for all the bad, pagan, sinful, gross, horrible things. You're really a lot more focused on a spouse getting to know their husband. And of course, that includes things he doesn't like, but that shouldn't be the focus. The focus should be, what do you like? How do we get closer? What are you telling me? What can I learn? You're perfect. I love you, right? So I think that's an important piece. This leads into the false humility. I feel like is sort of a revival of being enlightened to what false humility is, and the birth of the true self, a revival of the true self, which is the part that trusts God. And you don't have to be God, and you can't be God, but you get it finally. And so, it's better to obey than to sacrifice. And slipping into these sacrificial martyr roles, it's like that's a false self. That's not holy. No. And in fact, it's a big fat bummer. It's depressing. And it robs us of our joy. And joy is good, right? And so I feel like that's been a revival too. As all of this is kind of coming together, I'm noticing that joy and compassion in certain ways is starting to get some traction. I've noticed a change in that. I don't know if you have or not, but I have definitely noticed that. And so then this opens to what I'm starting to segue into, looking ahead, what some of my goals are. And one of my focuses lately, massive focus right now, is gratitude. And I've been reading books on gratitude and watching some programming on it and discussing the concept of it. And gratitude brings safety, which is really one of the primary pillars of attachment. I feel safe, right? I feel safe with you. I feel safe. I can tell you who I am, right or wrong or indifferent or whatever. This is what you're getting. Let's try to work out how this works out. Do you still love me? And so when you have gratitude, when you have time to be grateful, you can feel somewhat safe and hopefully totally safe. But after a really hard year, and my husband and I moved, we moved from Vermont to Florida, and then we moved, to another house, and it was rough. My husband was really sick, and sometimes we can think, well, it's really hard to be grateful, but it's actually not hard to be grateful. It's hard not to be grateful. It's hard to be always upset. That takes so much more energy than being grateful. And gratitude is, I say, it's the fountain of life. It's the fountain that when you drink from it, and you can drink from it anytime you want, it can show you, it can give you the world, the life of your dreams. It gives that to you. Gratitude gives to you. You know gratitude, you see what you have. This is amazing, right? Do you ever think about your spouse and you're complaining? Of course, I'm a marriage therapist. I work with people. They go through stuff they're complaining about. And that's part of the work I do. And it's important that we address things. But sometimes when we think about our spouse and we think of, write down all the things that you have gratitude about your spouse. Now, that I'm not trying to fake this thing, and I'm not doing that. Okay. This isn't some after school special. But sometimes when we can open our eyes to a bigger picture of our spouse, that gratitude turns into this joy of what we already do have, what resources we have in this person for who they are, these wonderful things about our spouse. And so gratitude, look into gratitude. I have a bunch of books, a stack, and I'm going to start, actually, one of my goals is to read more. I don't want to say that's a goal because I'll be held to it. And what if I don't do it? Because I don't know, people who get doctorates stop pleasure reading because you had to read against your will for so long. I admit that I had to read a lot against my will, but But looking ahead and segueing from gratitude into the things that I'm looking ahead and what I want to do this year as we usher this 2020 Gregorian, whatever you want to call, the way we're this measurement of the year. But here's some of my goals. We're going to go through them quickly since we're almost done. Oh my gosh, just have a couple minutes. But so here are my goals. So these are my goals, right? This is the things looking ahead that I want to do. Now that we've talked about attachment and we've talked about the important core values of what I feel like this year brought to me. So what did this year bring to you? So now what do you do? Right? So here's what happened. And the fallout is this. So I'm going to start a program where I'm going to do this at least 6 days a week and maybe even 7, but it's slow stretching. And there's a lot of information about slow stretching and how good and healthy it is for you. It actually helps you build new capillaries. It helps with stress management. It helps your joints. It keeps you younger longer in terms of just being flexible and more wiry. And I'm going to start doing that. And everything I'm saying here, do you understand? I'm saying this, so I will have to do it because I'm not going to lie and I don't want to be made a liar. So I'm going to start doing slow stretching every day because I used to dance and be part of a dance team. And since I've moved, I haven't done that. And I've noticed a difference in how I feel. I miss dancing. My friend Kim, my goodness, if I could ever explain to you how much I miss her. But anyway, we danced and it was just such an important part of my life. And now that's been kind of gone. And now we're all locked in our house. So that's one of my goals. The other thing that I want to do is I need to rein in my schedule, right? So I say this because this might trigger ideas in you if you're looking for things you might want to concentrate on, but I need to compartmentalize my schedule. And here I am in New Year's clothes, all sequencing and talking about compartmentalizing my schedule. Isn't that funny how life is? Like, we're celebrating. What are your goals? Having a more compartmentalized schedule, But anyway, I need to do that because I need to not scatter out different work I do. I need to figure out and do some more time blocking. And I just think that's going to help me. It's been really this kind of year where you feel like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but with everything that's happened, it's like everything exploded. And then I got out of all of these rhythms that I have always had. And actually, my journey with this explosion began 4 years ago when my younger son went into the United States Marine Corps because I had a rhythm that stabilized me. But that event, and don't judge me, this is me, kind of rocked me. And it took me out of the rhythms I stabilized. I had moved. My older son had moved to Australia. My younger son went into the Marine Corps, and I had moved away from my fellowship and my dance team and my study groups and friends and places where I served on the board and the bank teller I knew and all that. And it kind of just, everything was just too much at that time. And it took me out of all the rhythms that stabilized me. And I need those things. And it's really been like, in those 4 years, I've really never gotten back to anything that I feel like flows right. It's almost like life has just been nothing but a scavenger hunt. And I just try to get through that day. And I'm not in these habits and these rhythms that I always knew, right? The weekly Sabbath I do, but really a lot of the details within that had really worked for me. For whatever, a lot of reasons, my husband's health and just my, what do I say? I soiled the carpet with my face for 2 months after my son left. But these were just things that I struggled with. Other people might not struggle with things like that as much, but everybody's different. But anyway, so I'm going to do that. I want to get back down to these rhythms. I want to develop these rhythms. So I have to work really hard at it. It's going to take intentionality. It's going to take sitting down, writing it down, time blocking and planning and getting into rhythms. And I'm even going to probably do a show on that because I want to help you with a little bit more hands-on with how to do that. I'm just going to do that. So that's good. Yeah, that's going to be a part of the strategy there is going to be writing things down that I want to do. And when you write things down, things written, I can say it is written. You will get their laundry done today. right? So I used to have Blue Monday, right? I used to do all these things where I would feel like it was sentimental to connect with all these women in the past. And I always did my laundry on Monday, but all of a sudden, we were, we had moved to Vermont. I was doing home hospice for an uncle. I got out of all the routines. My son was gone. I was in this new place. And then we finally get here and we get settled, and then COVID, right? So just kind of add at all these routines. Now, you would think that you would be very easily in a routine when you're not leaving your house all that much and your life orbits more around your home. And for whatever reason, where you would think that would happen, for me, it's done the opposite. I've just kind of gone off the rails with my schedule and my time management. And I don't think that's good for me. So I'm going to change that, right? I'm going to take intentionality and I'm going to put it to work. I'm going to happen to this life, not let this life happen to me, right? Which actually goes into this idea about being present. That's my most massive goal, is being present. I'm a future thinking person and I'm a planner, and living in the present is not as easy for me, though I have been starting to realize. I think that's one of the things I found with the COVID situation, is that I'm forced to live in the present now, and how uncomfortable that can be. And that's something I need to do and work on. I'm going to work harder at reaching out to friends. I think many friends are like, hey, are you still alive? I'm an all or nothing person, and I kind of get introverted, and I'm not reaching out. I'm not always returning all calls or emails like I should. And I'm not really proud of that, but I want to get better at that. So if you're one of the people that I need to go, like, do you understand? I'm getting there. Everybody deals with global pandemics differently. Okay. I'm going to work really hard at boosting my immune system. That's another thing that takes intentionality and many orders from Swanson or other places, wherever, you're getting your supplementation. But I've been reading about, taking certain supplements where you are putting this together and you're boosting up your immune system. I'm one of the people that feels like I'm probably going to have to deal with this COVID thing the rest of my life, because I don't really see it leaving. So I need to boost my immune system, and I'm starting that in earnest. And that takes time. So I'd encourage you to do that as well, because, my husband's quite vulnerable and I need to protect him, but I need to be strong and do what I've got to do to manage my own life and get back to living. That has to happen sometime. The other two things I'm doing, these are the two things. Now, one is more fun than the other. And, one is more, I think I'll find more victory in the other. So one's more victory, one's more fun. So one of the things I have to do is I have to work this year, and I actually might even be embarking on a project related to it, but I have to discover a way to feed my husband. So okay, that might sound funny, but discovering foods for my husband. So it's interesting to talk about other people. I hadn't asked him if I could, but I think I'll just be generic here. But my husband has this thing called G6PD. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's very rare. You don't find people in America that have it very often. It's people of Mediterranean descent, and it's G6PD. And what that means is it's a blood disorder. It's like an enzyme deficiency. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme deficiency is what it stands for. So what happens is, if he eats like legumes or peas or blue dye, or is near mothballs, or eats broad beans, anything like that, peanuts, anything like that, what it does is it causes the red blood cells to explode and clogs their kidney. It's a terrible problem. So he can't eat anything like that. Now, at the same time, we found out that he has a massive allergy to the 3 proteins in dairy. So dairy-free, all legume-free, which all the dairy-free things are all thickened and made delicious by legumes, right? Guar gum or locust beans or whatever. These things, right? All these plant-based things are all made texturally good with things that he can't have. So he can't have dairy. He can't have any legumes or anything like that. And also we biblically clean and kosher. So, which is fine, but that's easier with the dairy. But It's not easy because G6PD prevents a lot of the treats. So I have to figure this out, right? I want to figure this out and keep my husband healthy with what he's been struggling with. And I'm going to do it. Okay. Do you hear me? I'm going to figure out. And we have started figuring out a few things, and he's doing a fast right now. And once he's done the fast, man, I'm going to be ushering in these new ways of cooking. And it will be different because I think we ate a lot of dairy. Now I'm figuring this out. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do this year is I needed to incorporate something in my life that would take my focus, and it would be something I could be passionate about. Because you just noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but like during COVID, some of your passion just kind of like drained out of the tub. And if that didn't happen to you, call me and tell me why it didn't happen, because I'll drink whatever water you're drinking. But one thing I want to do is I have a friend named Liz, and she plays violin, and she's so inspirational the way that she plays her violin when she worships. I mean, she's just a beautiful worshiper, and the way she plays, it just always touches my heart. So look what I did. I mean, it's really cheap. It's like $100, but I bought a violin. I'm going to learn to play it for worship. Look, I even have a tag on it, but I'm going to learn how to play the violin. I've always wanted to play the violin. I played the guitar enough to not be quite as bad as Phoebe, but only maybe enough chords to write a few songs. But I'm going to start playing the violin for worship. So I'm going to start incorporating that as an experience, sensory and emotional and spiritual experience all in one, and pursue something like that I feel like is going to be good for my joy. And so if I'm taking this year and I'm looking back, I do see there's been revival through all of this mess in a lot of good ways. I have also seen a lot of struggle where we can just reach out and be there for each other in new ways and find those ways. And, if you call a friend and say, what do you need? And they say, I don't know. You can be like, me neither. I don't know what I need. And you know what? There's bonding in that. So I don't know. I miss my friends. You miss your friends. I miss my family. We miss each other. We can still find gratitude. We can still resurrect compassion for other people. We can still revive that. This revival isn't marching and screaming and doing all these things all the time. Sometimes revival is just the compassion in us, the gratitude in us, revival of moderation, of backing off some of the things that we are so rabid about and just being more friendly and getting further with people, not because they're the agenda, but because they're family and because God loves them. And so my takeaway from that year was that this stuff is revived. What am I going to do with that information and that wisdom and that knowledge and all that? Well, I'm going to move forward intentionally, walking in gratitude, walking in that compassion, and learning as I go. Now, I certainly am not perfect at it, and I don't expect that I will be, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try this year. So, we'll be staying home on the 31st of January and just kind of having a quiet dinner like probably you'll be doing. So in a way, we will literally just like all be on the same page in so many ways. But what are some things that what was your takeaway from this year? What was the stuff? It wasn't just political unrest, I hope. I hope you found other things, because there is a kaleidoscope of life to look at. And may your joy be full. And choose joy over fear. Choose inertia towards something than fear of encountering something. Really, I'm speaking to myself here. But this is stuff that we can do, stuff we need to do, stuff that's going to bring us the real joy, the abundant joy. Because the future begins now. And never is that more true whenever we hit a time where there's a new reckoning of the counting of the passage of time. And in this way, in this secular way, this is how it's measured for a lot of people. So I thought this would be a good message to share with you, give you a little insight into where I am. And we'll see where I end up with all that. And I hope I can I hope I accomplish it. I hope I do. And I hope you do. And I hope wherever you're doing, I hope you're happy. And I hope that you feel loved and safe and know that God loves you. And always remember that the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.